How far can a woman push before the tables turn? When I posted a picture with my ex to prove I didn't care if my husband left, I thought I was in control. Until I came home to find only his essentials gone and a cold, factual note taped to the fridge. Why did I still feel blindsided, even after I convinced myself I'd already won? My name is Kenia Veylin, and I'm 34 years old. I work as an insurance claims manager at Hartwell and Associates, a mid-sized firm downtown. My life looked perfect from the outside: suburban house with a white picket fence, a 9-year-old daughter named Nora, and a husband who taught high school mathematics. Scott Harker was 36, methodical, and predictable in every way that once felt comforting but had slowly become suffocating. The morning everything started to unravel began like any other Tuesday. Scott stood at the kitchen counter, grading papers with his usual methodical precision, red pen moving in neat, controlled strokes. His brown hair was already showing silver at the temples, and his wire-rimmed glasses reflected the morning light streaming through our kitchen window. "Coffee's fresh," he said without looking up, his voice carrying that same even tone he used for everything, discussing lesson plans, asking about my day, or mentioning that the garbage disposal needed fixing. I poured myself a cup, watching him work. Everything about Scott was measured, careful, safe. Even the way he arranged his papers in perfect stacks, the way he lined up his pens by color, the way he folded his napkin into precise quarters. After 12 years of marriage, I could predict his every movement. "I might be late tonight," I said, testing the waters. "Big case coming in. Insurance fraud, looks complicated." Scott nodded, still focused on his grading. "I'll pick up Nora from soccer practice. Dinner at 6:30. Maybe 7. This case might run long." For the first time that morning, Scott looked up. His grey eyes studied my face with the same analytical attention he gave his math problems. "Everything okay at work? You've had a lot of late cases recently." There it was, that quiet observation that felt like surveillance. Not accusation, not anger, just Scott being Scott, noticing patterns and filing them away in his methodical mind. "It's just busy season," I said, forcing a smile. "You know how it is." But Scott kept watching me, and I felt that familiar irritation rising in my chest. The way he looked at me sometimes, like I was a problem he was trying to solve, made me want to scream. When had his attention started feeling like scrutiny? "Mum, can you braid my hair?" Nora appeared in the kitchen, already dressed in her soccer uniform, her blonde hair, so much like mine, hanging loose around her shoulders. I set down my coffee and moved behind her, my fingers working through the familiar routine of French braiding. Nora chatted about her upcoming game, about her friend Emma's birthday party, about the book report she needed to finish. Normal 9-year-old concerns in a normal 9-year-old voice. But I caught Scott watching us in the reflection of the window, and something in his expression made my stomach tighten. Not suspicion exactly, but awareness, like he was cataloguing this moment, storing it away with all his other careful observations. After dropping Nora at school, I drove to the office, my mind already shifting to thoughts of Julian Rowe. We'd reconnected 6 months ago when I'd stopped by Finnegan's pub after a particularly frustrating day at work. Julian had been my boyfriend in college, before I'd met Scott, before I'd settled into suburban respectability. Seeing him behind the bar, still lean and charming at 33, with that same crooked smile that had made my heart race at 21, had felt like stepping back into a version of myself I'd forgotten existed. "Kenia," my assistant Carrie waved me over as soon as I walked into the office. "Mr. Brennan wants to see you about the Morrison file." I nodded, but my phone was already buzzing with a text from Julian. "Missing you already. Last night was incredible." My pulse quickened as I deleted the message, glancing around to make sure no one had seen. The thrill of the secret, the delicious danger of it, made everything else. The fluorescent office lights, the stack of claim forms on my desk, The prospect of going home to Scott's predictable routine seemed dull by comparison. The Morrison file was straightforward, a house fire with some questionable details that would require follow-up. I handled it efficiently, professionally, but part of my mind was already planning the evening. Julian had suggested meeting at Finnegan's around 8. I could claim the case required late research, maybe even stage a few photos at the office to support my story. By 5 o'clock, I was crafting my text to Scott. Case is more complex than expected. Will be very late. Don't wait up. His response came immediately. Understood. Nora's homework is done. We'll save you dinner. The matter-of-fact tone should have made me feel guilty. Instead, it irritated me. No questions, no protests, no passionate demand that I come home to him instead. Just acceptance, understanding, accommodation. When had Scott stopped fighting for my attention? I stayed at the office until 7, actually working on the Morrison file to make my story plausible, then drove to Finnegan's. The pub was busy with the after-work crowd, but Julian spotted me immediately, his face lighting up with that grin that made me feel 21 again. "There's my beautiful insurance investigator," he said, sliding a glass of wine across the bar. "Rough day fighting fraud?" "You have no idea." I settled onto the bar stool, acutely aware of how Julian's eyes moved over me, appreciating what he saw. When had Scott stopped looking at me like that? We talked and laughed, Julian regaling me with stories from his shift, making me feel witty and desirable, and alive in ways I'd forgotten were possible. Around 9:30, I took a selfie of us, Julian's arm around my shoulders, both of us laughing at something he'd just said. "Post it," Julian urged. "Show the world how happy you look." I hesitated for a moment, thinking of Scott at home, probably grading papers or reading to Nora. Then I uploaded the photo to my Instagram story with the caption, "Sometimes you need good friends and good wine." The drive home felt like returning to prison. Our house was dark, except for the porch light Scott always left on for me. I found a plate of dinner wrapped in the refrigerator and a note. "Hope the case went well. Nora's science project is due Friday. She might need help with the poster board. M." Even his notes were methodical, thoughtful, considerate. I wanted to crumple it up and scream. Instead, I climbed the stairs quietly, peeked into Nora's room where she slept peacefully surrounded by stuffed animals, then slipped into the master bedroom. Scott was asleep, breathing deeply, his reading glasses folded neatly on the nightstand beside a stack of graded tests. I lay awake beside him for hours, replaying the evening with Julian, comparing his passionate attention to Scott's quiet steadiness. Somewhere in the darkness, I made a decision that would change everything. I deserved more than this predictable life. I deserved to feel alive. What I didn't know was that Scott had been making decisions too. The next morning, I found his laptop open on the kitchen table, displaying a spreadsheet labeled dates and receipts. My blood ran cold as I saw the entries. Dates of my supposed late nights at work, cross-referenced with my credit card charges, my social media posts, even gas station receipts that tracked my movements. Scott appeared in the doorway, already dressed for work, his expression unreadable. "Forget to close something?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Did I?" He moved past me to close the laptop, his movements as controlled as always. "I was working on our budget. Interesting patterns in our expenses lately." The word patterns hung in the air between us like a challenge, but Scott didn't push, didn't accuse, didn't demand explanations. He just kissed my forehead goodbye and left for work, leaving me staring at the closed laptop and wondering exactly how much my methodical husband had already figured out. The insurance office felt different after seeing that spreadsheet. Every time my phone buzzed with a message from Julian, I found myself glancing around nervously, wondering who might be watching, who might be taking notes. But the thrill of the secret was intoxicating, and by Wednesday afternoon, I was already planning another evening out. "You seem distracted today," my colleague Beth observed as we reviewed claim files together. "Everything okay at home?" "Just tired," I replied, but I caught her studying my face with the same analytical attention Scott had been showing lately. "Long hours on this fraud case." Beth nodded, but something in her expression suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. I made a mental note to be more careful about my cover stories at work. Julian texted me around 3. "Can't stop thinking about you. Free tonight?" I glanced around the office, then typed back, "Working late again. Meet at 8. "Perfect. Wear that blue dress I love." The blue dress was hanging in my office closet, along with a small makeup bag and a bottle of perfume I'd started keeping there. I'd gotten good at these quick transformations, changing from suburban mom to the woman Julian remembered from college. At 5:30, I called Scott. "Another late night, I'm afraid. This case is really complex." "Of course," Scott said in that same understanding tone. "I'll handle dinner and homework. Drive safely." No questions about which case, no requests for details, no complaints about my absence. Part of me wanted him to fight for me, to demand I come home, to show some passion about my increasing absences. Instead, he just accommodated, adapted, made it easy for me to lie to him. Finnegan's was quieter on Wednesday night, which meant more intimate conversation with Julian. We sat in a corner booth, his hand resting on my thigh under the table, making me feel reckless and desired. "Tell me about your boring husband," Julian said with that crooked grin. "Still grading papers and going to bed at 9? "Scott isn't boring," I said automatically, then caught myself. "I mean, he's just predictable, safe. Everything in his life has to be organized, planned, controlled." "Sounds deadly." Julian's thumb traced circles on my leg. "When's the last time he surprised you? Made you feel like this?" He leaned in and kissed me, right there in the pub where anyone could see. The danger of it, the possibility that someone we knew might witness this moment, made my heart race. "Take a picture with me," Julian suggested when we broke apart. "I want to remember how beautiful you look right now." We took several selfies, Julian's arm around me, both of us laughing and looking thoroughly pleased with ourselves. I posted the best one to my Instagram story with the caption, "Good friends make everything better." "Your husband follows your social media?" Julian asked. "Scott barely uses social media. He thinks it's a waste of time." Which was true. Scott preferred books to screens, face-to-face conversation to digital interaction. His practical nature, which had once seemed admirable, now felt hopelessly outdated. "Good," Julian said, "because I plan to see a lot more of you." The possessive tone in his voice thrilled me. When had Scott last sounded possessive about anything related to me? Thursday morning brought an uncomfortable conversation with my mother-in-law, Evelyn. She called while I was getting ready for work, her voice carrying that crisp authority that had always intimidated me slightly. "Kenia, dear, I'm planning Sunday dinner. Will you and Scott be joining us?" "Of course," I said, though I was already thinking about whether Julian might be free Sunday evening. "Wonderful. And how are things? Scott seemed tired when I spoke to him yesterday." There was something in her tone that made me pause. Evelyn Harker was 62, sharp as a tack, and fiercely protective of her son. She'd never quite warmed to me, though she'd always been polite. "He's been working hard," I said carefully. "You know how dedicated he is to his students." "Yes, I do know. Scott has always been dedicated to the people he loves." The emphasis on always felt pointed. I hope he knows how much his family appreciates that dedication. After hanging up, I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Did Evelyn suspect something? Had Scott said something to her about my late nights, my changing behavior? The paranoia followed me to work, where I found myself analyzing every conversation, every glance from my colleagues. When my boss, Mr. Brennan, asked about my overtime hours, I felt my pulse spike. "The Morrison case is requiring extensive research," I explained. Insurance fraud cases always take longer than expected. Of course, just make sure you're documenting your hours properly. HR has been asking questions about overtime authorization. HR asking questions. Another red flag. Another reminder that my carefully constructed lies might not be as bulletproof as I'd thought. That evening, I told Scott I needed to work late again, but this time he looked up from his grading with an expression I couldn't quite read. 3 late nights this week, he observed. This must be quite a case. Insurance fraud is complicated, I said, repeating my standard explanation. Lots of moving parts, lots of documentation to review. Scott nodded slowly. I'm sure it is. What's the client's name again? The question caught me off guard. Scott had never asked for specific details about my work before. Morrison, I said quickly. House fire, suspicious circumstances. Ah, Scott returned to his papers. Well, drive carefully. I love you. The casual I love you should have made me feel guilty. Instead, it felt like another item on Scott's daily checklist. Kiss wife goodbye, check. Tell wife you love her, check. Grade papers, check. At Finnegan's, Julian was in a playful mood, regaling the bar patrons with stories and jokes that had everyone laughing. I felt proud to be with him, to be the woman who caught his attention when he could have his pick of admirers. Ladies and gentlemen, Julian announced to the small crowd, I want you to meet the most beautiful insurance investigator in the city. Everyone turned to look at me, raising their glasses in a mock toast. I laughed and took a bow, feeling sophisticated and desirable. Someone took a picture of the moment, Julian's arm around my waist, both of us glowing with alcohol and attraction. Post it, Julian urged again. Show everyone how happy you are. This time I didn't hesitate. The photo went up on my Instagram story with the caption, Living my best life with amazing people. Later, as Julian walked me to my car, he made a comment that should have concerned me more than it did. So when do I get to see your place? He asked. I mean, if your husband's always working or sleeping, it seems like we could have some privacy there. Julian, I can't. I'm kidding, he said quickly, but something in his eyes suggested he wasn't entirely joking. Though I have to admit, I'm curious about the guy who managed to tie down Kenia Veylin. Must be quite something. He's just different from you, I said. Different how? Less fun? Less exciting? Julian's hand traced my jawline. Less likely to make you feel like the incredible woman you are. The questions echoed in my head during the drive home. Scott was different from Julian in every conceivable way. Where Julian was spontaneous, Scott was planned. Where Julian was passionate, Scott was steady. Where Julian made me feel alive and reckless, Scott made me feel safe, comfortable, predictable. But as I pulled into our driveway, I noticed something that made my stomach clench. Scott's car was there, but so was his brother Ethan's truck. Through the living room window, I could see both men sitting at our kitchen table, papers spread between them, engaged in what looked like a serious conversation. I sat in my car for a moment, watching them through the window. Scott was talking, gesturing at the papers, while Ethan listened with a grave expression. Whatever they were discussing, it wasn't casual family conversation. When I finally went inside, both men looked up with carefully neutral expressions. Hi, honey, Scott said in his usual tone. How was your evening at the office? Productive, I replied, acutely aware of Ethan's presence. Hi, Ethan. Working late too? Ethan Harker was 31, a contractor who usually maintained an easygoing demeanor. Tonight he looked serious, almost uncomfortable. Just helping Scott with some paperwork, Ethan said carefully. Nothing urgent. The papers on the table were face down, but I could see they were official-looking documents. Legal forms, maybe, or financial statements. Well, I'm exhausted, I announced. Long day tomorrow, too. As I headed upstairs, I heard Scott say quietly, Thanks for coming over, Ethan. I appreciate the advice. Anytime, brother. You know I'm here for whatever you need. Their voices carried a weight that made my chest tight with anxiety. Whatever they'd been discussing, it involved me. I was certain of it. Lying in bed beside Scott that night, I replayed the evening's events, Julian's possessive comments, the photo that was now circulating on social media, the mysterious meeting between Scott and his brother. For the first time since this had all started, I wondered if I was playing a more dangerous game than I'd realized. But when Julian texted me Friday morning, with plans for the weekend, the thrill of anticipation overrode my concerns. I was tired of being careful, tired of being the responsible suburban wife and mother. I deserved to feel alive, to feel wanted, to feel like the woman I'd been before I'd settled into this predictable life. What I didn't realize was that Scott had stopped being predictable. While I was busy living my double life, my methodical husband had been conducting an investigation of his own. And unlike my emotional decisions, Scott's plans were based on facts, evidence, and a patience I'd completely underestimated. The trap was already set. I just hadn't walked into it yet. Friday evening brought the moment that would change everything. Julian had suggested we meet at Finnegan's for what he called a celebration, though when I asked what we were celebrating, he just grinned and said we'd figure it out. I went through my usual routine of staying late at the office, changing into the blue dress Julian loved, touching up my makeup in the bathroom mirror. But something felt different tonight. Maybe it was the memory of Scott and Ethan's serious conversation, or maybe it was the way my coworkers had been looking at me lately, but I felt more exposed than usual. "Another late night?" Beth asked as she gathered her things to leave. "This Morrison case is really taking its toll on you." "Almost finished with it," I lied smoothly. "Just need to tie up a few loose ends." Beth nodded, but her expression suggested she wasn't buying my story anymore. "Well, don't work too hard. It's important to maintain work-life balance." The comment felt pointed, like she knew something I didn't realize she knew. At Finnegan's, Julian was holding court at the bar, entertaining a group of regulars with stories from his bartending days. He lit up when he saw me, pulling me into his arms for a kiss that was definitely not appropriate for public viewing. "There's my gorgeous girl," he announced to the entire bar. "Everyone, meet Kenia, the woman who's been keeping me up nights." The comment drew laughter from his audience, but I felt my cheeks burn. Julian had never been so openly possessive, so publicly claiming about our relationship. "Julian," I murmured, "maybe we should keep it down a little." "Why?" His arm tightened around my waist. "Ashamed to be seen with me?" "Of course not. Good, because I'm not ashamed to be seen with you." He turned back to the crowd. "This woman right here is everything a man could want. Beautiful, smart, successful. And she chose to spend her Friday night with me instead of at home with her boring husband." The words hit me like a slap. Julian had never mentioned Scott so directly in public before, never made our affair so obvious to strangers. I looked around the bar and realized several people were staring at us with expressions ranging from amusement to disapproval. "Julian, please." "What? It's not like it's a secret." He pulled out his phone and snapped a selfie of us before I could protest. "In fact, let's make it official." Before I could stop him, Julian was posting the photo to his own Instagram account, tagging me and adding the caption, "When you find someone who makes you remember what passion feels like. Worth it, gotcha, no regrets." My phone immediately started buzzing with notifications. Friends, co-workers, acquaintances, all seeing Julian's post, all putting together pieces I'd thought I was keeping separate. "You tagged me," I said, my voice tight with panic. "Of course I tagged you. I want the world to know how I feel about you." Julian's eyes were bright with alcohol and something else. Possession, maybe, or triumph. "Unless you're embarrassed about us." "I'm not embarrassed, I'm just worried about what people will think." Julian's voice carried across the bar. "Worried about your reputation, about what your husband might say." The conversation around us had quieted. I realized people were listening, watching this drama unfold like it was entertainment. "Can we please talk about this privately?" I whispered. "Why? Are you ashamed of me, Kenia?" Julian's voice was getting louder, more aggressive. "Are you embarrassed that you chose excitement over safety, passion over predictability?" I felt trapped, cornered between Julian's public display and the watching eyes of strangers. My phone kept buzzing with notifications, each one representing another person who now knew about my affair. "I need some air," I said, pushing away from the bar. But Julian followed me outside, his demeanor shifting from playful to something darker. "What's wrong with you tonight?" he demanded. "I thought you wanted this. I thought you wanted to be with me." "I do want to be with you, but this, the public display, the social media posts, it's too much, too fast." Julian stepped closer, his hand gripping my arm. "Too much? Kenia, we've been sneaking around for months. I'm tired of being your dirty little secret." "You're not a secret, you're just—" "What? Your side piece? Your little rebellion against suburban boredom?" His grip tightened. "I thought this meant something to you." "It does mean something to me." "Then prove it." Julian's eyes were hard now, calculating. "Stop hiding. Stop pretending you're the perfect wife and mother. Choose me, publicly, completely." The ultimatum hung in the air between us. In that moment, I realized Julian had been planning this confrontation, pushing me toward a public declaration that would burn all my bridges. "I need time to think," I said. "Time to think, or time to run back to your safe little life." Julian released my arm. "You know what, Kenia? Maybe your husband is right to ignore you. Maybe you're not worth fighting for if you can't even admit what you want." The words stung, but they also sparked something defiant in me. How dare he suggest I wasn't worth fighting for? How dare he imply that Scott was right about anything? "Fine," I said, my voice shaking with anger and adrenaline. "You want me to choose? You want me to prove I'm not ashamed? Let's go back inside." Julian's expression shifted to surprise, then satisfaction. "Now you're talking." We went back into Finnegan's, where the earlier crowd was still gathered, still watching our drama with undisguised interest. I walked straight to the bar and ordered a double shot of whiskey. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, my voice carrying across the room, "I want you all to know that Julian Rowe is the most exciting thing that's happened to me in years." The bar erupted in cheers and applause. Julian pulled me close, kissing me passionately, while people took pictures and videos. I felt reckless, liberated, drunk on attention and rebellion. "That's my girl," Julian whispered in my ear. "Now everyone knows you're mine." We spent the next 2 hours drinking and laughing, taking selfies and videos, making out like teenagers while the bar crowd egged us on. I posted story after story to my Instagram, each one more defiant than the last. Having the time of my life with people who actually appreciate me. Sometimes you have to choose excitement over safety. Life's too short to be bored. The final post was a video of Julian and me laughing together, his arm around my shoulders, both of us clearly intoxicated and thoroughly pleased with ourselves. I captioned it, "When you find someone who makes you feel alive again. No regrets. Living my best life." It wasn't until I was driving home at nearly midnight that the reality of what I'd done began to sink in. My phone was buzzing constantly with comments, messages, and notifications. Friends, co-workers, neighbors. Everyone had seen the posts. Everyone knew about Julian. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway, but I noticed Scott's car was missing. Strange, he never went out this late on weeknights. Inside, I found a note on the kitchen table. "Took Nora to my mother's for the weekend. Thought you might want some space to figure things out. M." The note was written in Scott's careful handwriting, each letter perfectly formed, no emotion visible in the controlled script. But the message itself was devastating in its implications. He knew. He'd seen the posts, understood what they meant, and he'd removed our daughter from the situation. I poured myself another drink and scrolled through the responses to my social media posts. Most were supportive comments from friends who didn't know the full situation, but a few were more pointed. Isn't she married? What about her daughter? This is messy. And then I saw a comment that made my blood run cold. It was from Evelyn, Scott's mother. Some choices can't be undone, dear. My mother-in-law had seen everything. Scott had seen everything. By tomorrow, everyone in our social circle would know about Julian, about my affair, about my very public declaration of independence from my marriage. I stumbled upstairs to our bedroom, which felt cavernous and cold without Scott's presence. His side of the bed was made with military precision, his nightstand cleared of everything except a single envelope with my name on it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a list of dates and locations, each one corresponding to one of my supposed late nights at work. Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, gas station timestamps. Scott had been tracking my movements for weeks, maybe months. At the bottom of the page, in his careful handwriting, was a single line. I hope it was worth it. I sat on our bed, surrounded by the evidence of my lies, and realized that while I'd been playing games, Scott had been preparing for war. My methodical, predictable husband had been anything but passive. He'd been gathering evidence, documenting my betrayal, building a case against me. And now, thanks to my public display at Finnegan's, he had all the ammunition he needed. The worst part was the silence. No angry phone calls, no dramatic confrontations, no passionate demands for explanation. Just quiet, methodical preparation for whatever came next. I'd wanted Scott to fight for me, to show passion about our marriage. Instead, I'd given him every reason to fight against me. And as I lay alone in our bed, scrolling through the social media posts that had seemed so liberating just hours before, I began to understand that I might have just made the biggest mistake of my life. But it was too late for regrets. The damage was done, the bridges were burned, and Scott, quiet, predictable Scott, was already 10 steps ahead of me in a game I didn't even realize we were playing. Saturday morning brought the full weight of my public humiliation crashing down. I woke up with a crushing hangover and a phone full of notifications that made my stomach turn. The videos and photos from Finnegan's had been shared, screenshotted, and spread across multiple social media platforms. What had felt like liberation the night before now looked like the desperate, drunken display it had actually been. My phone rang at 8 a.m. It was my mother, Kenia Veylin, her voice sharp with concern and embarrassment. "Kenia Marie, what in God's name were you thinking? Mrs. Patterson from down the street called me at 7 this morning, asking if I'd seen your Instagram. I had to look at pictures of my own daughter making out with some bartender in public." "Mom, I can explain." "Explain what? That you've lost your mind? That you've forgotten you have a husband and a daughter?" "Kenia, everyone is talking about this. Everyone." The word everyone hit me like a physical blow. In our small suburban community, gossip traveled faster than wildfire, and I'd just provided enough fuel to burn for months. "Where's Scott?" I asked. "How should I know where Scott is? Maybe he's trying to figure out how to explain to his daughter why Mommy was on the internet kissing another man." After hanging up, I tried calling Scott, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I tried Evelyn's house, knowing that's where Nora probably was, but Evelyn answered with a voice colder than winter. "Kenia." "Evelyn, I need to speak to Scott, and I want to see Nora." "I'm afraid that's not possible right now." "What do you mean it's not possible? She's my daughter." She's a 9-year-old child who's very confused and upset about why her mother's friends at school are talking about pictures they saw online. Evelyn's voice was controlled but steely. "Scott is trying to explain the situation to her in an age-appropriate way. I can explain it to her myself. Can you? Because from what I saw last night, your judgment about appropriate behavior seems somewhat compromised." The formal way she spoke, like she was delivering a legal judgment, made me realize this wasn't just family drama anymore. This was serious. "Evelyn, please, I know how this looks, but..." "How it looks?" Kenia, this isn't about appearances. This is about choices. And the choices you made last night have consequences for everyone in this family. She hung up, leaving me staring at my phone in our empty house. For the first time since this all began, I felt truly alone. By noon, the situation had gotten worse. My phone rang with a call from HR at work. Kenia, this is Patricia from Human Resources. We need to schedule a meeting for Monday morning to discuss some concerns that have been raised. What kind of concerns? It's better if we discuss this in person. Can you be in my office at 9 a.m.? Patricia, if this is about my overtime hours, I can explain. 9 a.m. Monday, Kenia. Don't be late. The professional courtesy in her voice was gone, replaced by the formal tone reserved for employees in serious trouble. I spent the afternoon trying to do damage control, calling friends and family members to explain the situation, but each conversation made things worse. My sister Lisa was blunt. Kenia, what were you thinking? You looked like a drunk teenager in those videos. My best friend Tessa, who had been encouraging my self-discovery for months, suddenly seemed less supportive. Maybe you should have been more discreet. This is pretty public for someone who's still married. Even my hairdresser called to cancel my standing appointment. I'm sorry, but some of my other clients have expressed concerns about the drama. I think it's better if we take a break. By evening, I was desperate enough to drive to Julian's apartment. I needed someone on my side, someone who understood why I'd made the choices I'd made. But Julian's reaction wasn't what I expected. You look terrible, he said when he opened the door. Rough day dealing with the fallout. Everyone's acting like I committed a crime, like having feelings for you is some kind of betrayal of everything decent. Julian shrugged, moving back to his couch where a basketball game was playing on TV. Well, you are married, and you do have a kid. People tend to judge that kind of thing. His casual dismissal stunned me. Last night you were telling me to choose you publicly. Now you're acting like this is all my fault. I never told you to get drunk and make a scene. That was your choice. Julian didn't even look away from the TV. I just said I was tired of being a secret. So now that I'm not keeping you secret, you're not interested anymore. Julian finally looked at me, and something in his expression made my stomach drop. Kenia, you're a beautiful woman, and we had some fun together. But this drama with your husband, your family, your job, that's not what I signed up for. What you signed up for? Julian, we've been seeing each other for months. I thought this meant something to you. It did mean something. It meant I got to spend time with an attractive, successful woman who made me feel good about myself. Julian's tone was matter-of-fact, almost businesslike. But I'm not looking to be the reason someone's life falls apart. The words hit me like a physical blow. My life isn't falling apart. Isn't it? You can't see your daughter, your job is in jeopardy, your husband has disappeared, and you're here begging me to tell you everything's going to be okay. Julian stood up, moving toward the door. Look, Kenia, you're a great woman, but you need to figure out your life, and I need to not be in the middle of it. He was dismissing me. After months of passionate declarations, after pushing me to choose him publicly, Julian was walking away the moment things got complicated. You're just going to abandon me? After everything we've shared? We shared some good times, Kenia, but we both knew this wasn't going to last forever. Julian opened the door. You need to go home and deal with your real life. I drove home in a daze, finally understanding that Julian had never seen me as anything more than a temporary distraction. While I'd been risking everything for what I thought was love, he'd been enjoying a casual affair with a married woman who made him feel important. The house felt like a tomb when I walked in. No sounds of Nora's chatter, no quiet presence of Scott grading papers, just silence and the weight of my own poor decisions. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through the continued social media fallout. The comments had gotten nastier as the day progressed. Homewrecker. Think about your daughter. Poor Scott, he deserves better. This is why marriages fail. Each comment was a small knife, cutting away at the justifications I'd built up over the past months. I'd told myself I deserved happiness, deserved excitement, deserved to feel alive. But sitting alone in my empty house, I realized I'd destroyed everything real in pursuit of something that had been an illusion from the start. Around 10 p.m., I heard a car in the driveway. My heart leaped, thinking Scott had come home. But when I looked out the window, I saw Ethan's truck. Scott's brother came to the door alone, his expression serious and uncomfortable. "Ethan, is Scott with you? Is Nora okay?" "They're both fine. Scott sent me to get some things." Ethan stepped inside, but he didn't meet my eyes. "Clothes for him and Nora. They'll be staying at Mom's for a while." "For how long?" "I don't know, Kenia. That's not really my decision to make." I watched Ethan move through the house, gathering items with the efficiency of someone who'd been given a specific list. Nora's favorite stuffed animals, Scott's work clothes, toiletries, school supplies. "Ethan, please. You have to talk to him. This whole thing got blown out of proportion. Yes, I made mistakes, but we can work through this." Ethan paused in packing Nora's backpack. "Kenia, I've known my brother my whole life. Scott doesn't make decisions lightly, and he doesn't give up on people easily. But when he's done, he's done." "What do you mean, done?" "I mean, he spent the weekend consulting with a lawyer. I mean, he's been documenting everything for months. I mean, this isn't just about you having an affair. It's about you lying, manipulating, and then broadcasting your betrayal to the entire community." Ethan's voice was sad but firm. "Scott tried to give you chances to come clean, to fix this. Instead, you doubled down." The words felt like a death sentence. "He's filing for divorce." "I can't speak for Scott, but I can tell you that he's protecting himself and Nora the way he thinks is best." Ethan finished packing and headed toward the door. "For what it's worth, Kenia, I'm sorry it came to this. But you made choices that have consequences." After Ethan left, I sat in the silence of my empty house and finally understood the full scope of what I'd lost. Not just Scott and Nora, but my reputation, my job security, my place in the community I'd lived in for over a decade. I'd wanted excitement, passion, a life that felt worth living. Instead, I'd destroyed the life I actually had in pursuit of a fantasy that had evaporated the moment it became inconvenient for the man I'd thought loved me. The methodical husband I'd found so boring had been quietly, systematically preparing for this moment. While I'd been playing games, Scott had been planning for the future, a future that apparently didn't include me. And as I sat alone with my wine and my regrets, I realized that the most devastating part wasn't Scott's anger or disappointment. It was his silence. He was done fighting for us, done trying to save our marriage, done caring enough to even confront me about my betrayal. I'd gotten exactly what I'd asked for, freedom from my predictable life. Now I had to figure out if it was worth everything I'd lost to get it. Monday morning, HR hit me like a cold audit. Patricia slid my timesheets across the desk, read circles around the lies, then matched them to keycard exits, login gaps, and bar receipts. 47 overtime hours collapsed under timestamps. Unpaid leave became the first sentence of my downfall, followed by a warning. Confirmed time theft, and they'd report me to the state commission. Driving home, I found Scott's law firm envelope. Custody, assets, exhibits, posts, hotel bills, texts, witnesses. Mom arrived with shame in her eyes. Evelyn delivered Nora's drawings. Every crayon, "I love you," felt like judgment. Scott never raised his voice. The courthouse felt like a cathedral of judgment. 3 weeks later, I faced Scott across the room, calm in his navy suit, hands folded precisely. His attorney, Janet Morrison, presented evidence methodically. Falsified overtime, hotel receipts, text messages with Julian, my Instagram post kissing him publicly while intoxicated. Screenshots showed Nora's classmates teasing her about her mother's behavior. Scott testified Nora was confused, hurt, having nightmares, asking if Mommy loved someone else more. I hadn't called or seen her in weeks, too consumed by my own chaos. Judge Hendricks ruled temporary primary custody to Scott. Supervised visitation for me, 2 hours every Saturday, court monitor required. Until I proved I prioritized Nora's welfare. The gavel fell like a door slamming shut. Scott walked out relieved, not triumphant. I sat frozen, marriage ended, daily motherhood lost, career ruined. I'd craved excitement over stability, passion over commitment. The quiet man I'd dismissed had documented my choices and let consequences unfold. His victory was complete. Not revenge through anger, but truth presented calmly. I'd thrown away everything worth having, and the fault was mine alone.